Good afternoon, my friends. Grim here. Hope you're doing very well today. Welcome to a video that I promise is going to be so much fun. I had so much fun even researching for this video. We are talking about my own personal favorite card from every year of Magic, and we are coming up on a 30-year anniversary. Magic getting pretty old, not gonna lie, you know? But each year has its own pros and its cons, and each year means something different in the context of this game to each of us, including myself. So I am going to pick one favorite card from every single year that the game has been alive and tell you what it is, why, and maybe provide a few fun stories along the way. Thank you to everybody in advance for watching, and to all supporters, but especially to Steven Mirabito, one of the very best supporters, a true pillar of our community, whose idea this was, or should I say, who saw this idea that Ryan Overturf had. And Steven thought it was a sweet idea. He saw Ryan do this on Twitter. One like equals one favorite Magic the Gathering card from each year, working backwards. So I will link this thread, of course, in the description below. It is a super cool idea. We're going to take a similar approach, working in reverse chronological order. As you can see, a lot of red cards, a lot of prowess cards, some weenies, treasure cruise. You know, my list is going to look very different, although I do appreciate Ryan's content, and I used to watch a good amount of it back when I was playing prowess and modern, back when that was a thing. So anyway, guys, that's what we're doing here today. I guess without any further ado, let's get into it, and just know that you should really watch through to the end, because as we get into the older bordered cards and my own favorite eras of Magic, we might actually go above and beyond picking merely one favorite. But anyway, let's not delay any further. Onward to the current year, 2022. That's where we'll kick it all off. So I've been out of Modern for the entirety of 2022, and a couple months on top of that, so no cards really speak to me. The only Magic I've played this year is Premodern, where nothing even close to 2022 is legal. Thankfully, Double Masters came out, and as much as I've been critical of many of these supplemental sets, some of them seem like money grabs, some of them are a little inexplicable in how they're distributed or priced or you name it, Double Masters has absolutely killed it with not only the printings, but with some of the alternative arts. And because I'm not really buying cards anymore, I can't really speak to pricing and distribution and all of that, but just looking at the set, there are some absolute knockouts in here. My favorite has got to be the alt art Grimflayer. It's about time we got one. Richard Kane Ferguson is an utter and complete legend of Magic the Gathering art, and I just basically had no choice but to pick Grimflayer, not that I didn't want to. Now maybe some of you are saying, hey, this video is already a ripoff. All Grimflayer printings are presumed to be among your favorite cards. They don't count. I want something else. Well, if you want something else, I've got you covered, and it's one that might surprise you, Weathered Wayfarer. This is the Double Masters new art, which I actually love. I actually think it's really, really good. Tough call between this and the old one, and you guys know how much of a sucker I am for old styles of art and, of course, the old border. So for a new printing to even compare to an old bordered one, you know it's got to be well done. And Weathered Wayfarer is probably one of the only mono white cards that will make this entire video, so it feels a little strange to have it right up front, but you know what? I absolutely love this card. I think from seeing it at a young age, playing with it a little bit at the kitchen table, to seeing how it works now in Premodern, it's just, the possibilities are endless. It forces you to build and even play in really interesting ways, and like many of my other cards with really high power ceilings, it dies to any form of interaction. I just think that is a good design principle. So I like Weathered Wayfarer a lot better than Crop Rotation, for example, or other tutor effects. This card makes the video. 2021 gave the Magic world many things, few of them good in my opinion, few of them net gains, but one of them was Time Spiral Remastered, and Time Spiral Remastered delivered us what every black-based mid-range player has always longed for, which is an old border treatment of the Lorwyn Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize itself, I think you guys could have guessed that it would have been on my list of most favorite cards of all time. This, along with Liliana of the Veil, are two of the very best designed cards I've ever had the pleasure of casting in Modern, and I've always said that those represent kind of the ceiling of power that I personally like to play with. They have meaningful drawbacks in multiple different ways, not just one meaningful drawback, but a wide variety of things that can go wrong, but the juice is really worth the squeeze with these cards, as time has told. So, I think Thoughtseize is just an incredibly balanced card. I love everything about the card, even before it got an old border. And now that it's got the old border, what more could you ask for? 2021's contender here for my favorite cards of all time. Pretty strong one, you have to say. 2020's entry is Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger. Despite how outclassed he was by Uro overall and in the head-to-head, Kroxa's still around, Uro in Modern not so much, right? And I feel a pretty strong association, a positive association, looking back at my kind of YouTubing Modern career when I think of Kroxa, because I was really in the big swing of things as far as everything, like playing leagues, making theory videos, and covering spoilers at the time Kroxa came along, and I do feel that I was kind of an early adopter of Kroxa. I was much higher on the card than many in the community seemed to be. Not speaking about my community, just the broader mid-range players and Modern players at large. And I also do believe the video in which I first played Kroxa when he was brand new is still to this day my most viewed video on YouTube, and if I also recall correctly, I did not play well. I was rushing home after an overtime day of work trying to play with Kroxa as soon as possible, and I was I think I remember, like, forgetting that he was in the graveyard, and then when I did remember, I was finding it difficult to click mana correctly, so kind of representative of the whole Grimflayer MTG experience, both the good and the bad, all wrapped up in one horrifying, disgusting-looking Elder Giant. Good times. From 2019, my favorite card is Oko, Thief of Crowns. Just kidding, I am not a serial killer. My favorite card is the Plague Man. The Plague Man can. The Plague Man cometh. This is another card that I just have such positive associations with, specifically as it regards our community, the people who have been part of my Discord, my Patreon, or even just viewing the content, because Modern Horizons 1 is when I first started really covering spoilers, partially because I was excited about cards like this. I even wrote an entire scouting report looking at the top, whatever it was, 25 or 30 or something meta decks, and rating Plague Engineer on a 1 of 10 scale in terms of how well he would suit the matchup, and writing about specifically what the best types to name are and other play patterns with the card in reference to specific foes. So this was really a whole lot of mileage got out of one, relatively simple card, but the power of Plague Man was very strong. He was seeing all kinds of sideboard play, even outside of traditional mid-range decks. Things that could play black were packing the Plague Man for quite a while, and it's not that I specifically wish to punish tribal decks, right? But as far as a mid-range playable card that is really genuinely powerful in the right circumstances, at this time, Plague Man was about the top of the heap, and of course it's also got the old border as well now, so very nice one all around. The Plague Man will always hold a place in my heart, never doubt it. my favorite card from 2018 is Assassin's Trophy. There are so very many reasons for this. Number one, the amount of games it's stolen me just by being able to main deck tag a Tron land or a bounce land or anything like that that Big Mana was bringing to the table at the time. That in and of itself, while also being never dead in creature-based matchups, even if it's suboptimal, is a big part of my positive association with Trophy, but it goes well beyond that, because when I think of Assassin's Trophy, I think of this era of Rock. Of Jund as well, but more of Rock than anything, because when you're talking about Rock, you're talking about Trophy, Decay, and Maelstrom Pulse at the time, and what is our split, and this was always such an ongoing debate. How many Trophy, how many Decay, how many Pulse? Is it 3-1-1? Is it 3-2-1? Do we not play Trophy at all, as some people advocated? Like, it was always an interesting discussion that had relevant context based on the list around it and the expected meta. And the other reason I love Assassin's Trophy is because this card is what made me commit fully to being a BGX mid-range player in paper, and later what compelled me to create this channel in the first place. So just to provide a little bit of a backstory, I'll be brief. I started dabbling in Modern in 2016 after a lifetime of being an on and off kitchen table Magic player. Started dabbling with my friend the Dogfish and one or two others, playing casually but within the confines of Modern, doing a real format for the first time ever, and then, becoming more competitive and starting to really solidify my interest in a few decks. One of the decks at the time was Abzan midrange, and the other one, well, I had a few, but another one was Mono Blue Taking Turns, which is a little bit more of a janky deck, even back then, and a little bit more of a meta call. And I think it was right before Assassin's Trophy came out, so we've been playing Modern for maybe a year now at this point, or something like that. And we go to our first ever event, and my only ever big event. I've done locals all the time and stuff, but my only ever big event was a Star City Games Open, I think it was, where I decided I was going to try to metagame all of the Tron and blue-white control that was going around at the time by bringing Taking Turns, and it did not go well. I faced Infect twice in the first 2 rounds. I faced some other bad matchups. I had to keep playing after I was already dead for day 2 in order to leave the event with a 500 record. I think I was 2-3, and I played again and ran into a Scapeshift player and styled on him and finished 3-3, and then I said, okay, now I can walk away from my first ever event not feeling totally bad. But the point is, we were at that event, and I believe the spoilers for Guilds of for Ravnica block at the time were coming out, and Assassin's Trophy was in there, and I said, you know what, this is it. This is what unlocks BG the Rock, because I didn't really want to play Jund so much, partially because of the investment. Also, Ren and 6 hadn't come out yet to really make Jund the top of the pack, and Abzan was good, it was fun, but I really felt the third color was a liability. I was kind of toying with just playing straight Rock anyway, and then Assassin's Trophy spoiler comes out, and I was right on the heels of this underwhelming Taking Turns performance, and I said, you know what, screw it. I'm focusing in on BGX midrange, in on the Rock specifically. I think Assassin's Trophy is going to put this specific deck over the top, into contention, and sure enough, that's what happened. There was, with the addition of 1 or 2 other printings, there was kind of a golden age where Rock was the best BGX deck, and it was like a top 6, top 8 meta deck vacillating between those 2 categories for like a solid half a year. That was my favorite time by far in Modern, and I owe that, as well as my own focus on the archetype, to Assassin's Trophy. 2017 was a year I didn't love for new printings, which is ironic, because it was my first full year playing Modern and really paying attention to new sets in that context. So I'm opting for a reprint, which is Duress. Now, I've never really loved this Ixalan block version of Duress, although looking at it up close, it is definitely better than I gave it credit for in the past, but Duress has been printed so many times, including more recently. I like this Strixhaven Mystical Archive one, and honestly some other of the newer ones are pretty good too. I always liked this one from a weird promotional comic book thing. That was definitely sweet, featuring Dak Faden, but my favorite of all time has gotta be the original Urza Saga art seen here in foil. Duress is an awesome card. I'm very happy to play with it a lot now in pre-modern. It also reminds me of the early days for me in modern, where interesting one-of sideboard options, including Duress, sometimes were quite viable. It's just a fantastic card. As you know, I love the mechanics of discard. I love the fact that you're spending tempo at sorcery speed to trade 1-for-1, which is kind of inherently a bad thing if you just look at it that way. And then you add in the fact that you can whiff. And then you add in on top of that the fact that you have extra restrictions, making whiffing even more likely with Duress, or paying life with Thoughtseize, etc. And it's a miracle that discard is playable at all. That just shows you the power of discard, the power of choosing whatever the most important, powerful, or synergistic piece of your opponent's hand is. And Duress does that, well, not as well as Thoughtseize, not as well as maybe one or two others, but it's definitely a sweet and iconic card and one of my favorites. 2016 brought with it Grim Flayer, whom we've already covered, of course, but also brought Liliana, the Last Hope, one of my favorite cards of all time. And honestly, every printing of Last Hope is awesome. I love the original. I absolutely love this purplish Mythic Edition, I guess it is. This is an incredible one. This was one of my most prized possessions by far when I was foiling Outrock, perhaps second only to a very nice edition of Liliana of the Veil herself. And honestly, this alternate art one is underrated, and these new ones from Double Masters look pretty cool too. Different strokes for different folks. There's a Liliana the Last Hope for any of your preferences. Let's settle on this Mythic Edition one to talk about her for just a moment. I absolutely love this card. I love Liliana as a character. I think it's very cool how the +1 can be used kind of most fairly as a defensive ability. You're defending yourself in two ways. You're increasing the loyalty on your Planeswalker and making that card more of a threat, and you're shrinking the attacking power, of course, of an opposing creature. But it used to blow my mind on the occasions where you would get it to line up where you tick up and kill an opposing creature. That is just like unheard of power level for a black-based mid-range deck at that time. That felt almost like it should be forbidden when it used to happen. Of course, she's now been kind of power crept out of the format, but I love the -2, especially it's kind of a thrill if you're gambling with it. If you don't have a creature card to return, you're kind of hoping to mill one, and of course when you do, that feels even better, but the thrill of the gamble is present with a card like this. And then winning the game with her ultimate is one of the best win conditions a mid-range player could ask for. Very fun all around. Absolutely love this card. One of the best in a list of the best. For 2015, if I were sticking to standard sets, I would have to go with Kolaghan's Command, or Kolaghan's Command, as the people who saw me play Jund for the first time would have heard it. And this is just one of the most iconic mid-range, especially Jund cards. And, even this doesn't see as much play as it used to. It used to be one of the biggest appeals to playing Jund was this card, and it does a little bit of everything. It's so Jundy, it's aggressive, the art, the name, it all kind of conveys that feeling very nicely. But if I'm to go a little bit beyond the scope of standard sets, I actually find myself on a distinctly non-Jundy card with Wasteland brought to us by Tempest Remastered, and I do think I am choosing Wasteland for my favorite here, even though it's a bit of a stretch in terms of bringing that set into this year, because I think Tempest Remastered is only online, maybe it shouldn't count, whatever. I covered my bases. If it doesn't, and if it does, then I think I like Wasteland better than K-Command, which might sound really strange to some of you, but ever since I've been playing Premodern, I have been a Wasteland addict. The Tempest Remastered version, of course, you just saw. I like this new Secret Lair version by Mark Poole, a classic artist, quite a lot, but our loyalty must lie with the original Tempest printing, which is a thing of stark beauty, and I love the play patterns of Wasteland, which are sometimes oppressive, but think of what they hold at bay. Wasteland is the very epitome of better the devil you know than the devil you don't, or the lesser of two evils, or any number of other cliches. Wasteland keeps a lot of BS in check in a way that no other card can. And ever since I've gotten really a lot of reps under my belt with and against the card in a format where I'm playing it consistently, I've got to say, I love it. 2014 was pretty slim pickings for my tastes, and it is thus represented by a very off-the-radar card, Child of Night. Seen here, the M15 version that came out in 2014, the one that I would have picked up would have come out in 2009 in M10. Same art, but a few years earlier. There is also an updated art, which I like quite a lot, definitely a sweet one, but the original one. This art, this simplistic art, there's so much concealed, and then enough is revealed for it to have a very unsettling effect, also a bit of an alluring effect. I think that kind of direction of art, especially for black cards, is something that has stuck with me and kept me coming back to Magic, being an interested party, not just in the mechanics of the game, but in the aesthetics and the flavor of the game. And Child of Night also reminds me of my kitchen table days in a very major way, because of course, Vampire Tribal is something that I did, and even beyond that, just playing like a 2-power lifelink for 2 at the kitchen table, it definitely saw a lot of play, and it wasn't the very best thing, but it's something that to me is emblematic of not only that art and aesthetic direction, but also of a certain time in my kind of Magic playing life. So yeah, Child of Night, a bit of a weird one, but there you go. 2013 was a blessed year for all rockers, my friends, because it brought us the SKUs, and I have always favored M14 printing of SKUs more so than this promo, certainly more so than the more over-the-top full art or full border promos, unbordered, whatever, borderless, that's what I'm trying to say, or Secret Lair versions. I don't really like those. Of course, there is an old bordered SKUs now, you probably have to go for that, but yeah, 2014 SKUs never steered me wrong, and this is just another example of great design that has kind of been washed away by the tides of fire, if you will. This is another really powerful hate piece that can take over the game, but is vulnerable to most forms of interaction. But interestingly, with an instant speed activated ability, damage-based forms of interaction can represent something that has diminishing returns against it. And I have won many of my most thrilling games against graveyard-based decks, not from them just stumbling, not from cleaning them out with Nihil Spellbomb, not from mulling to Leyline of the Void, but from playing a Scavenging Ooze and hoping that I get to untap. And then when I do get to untap, it's not over. The dance has only just begun. And I've also won so many thrilling games against fair decks like Humans and Burn by just barely staying in it long enough to draw a SKUs maybe on like turn 5. And then we start slowly but surely turning the corner. It's just a card that really represents so much of what I used to love about Modern in such a simple way. Deathrite Shaman was printed in 2012, and as soon as I realized that, I almost reflexively chose him for the slot. The card is kind of BGX distilled into one 1-drop, others might call it a 1-mana Planeswalker. However, I actually checked myself and said, you know what, I actually am going to look a little bit more closely at this here and not just default to Shaman, because I haven't played with the card very much. Really don't have too many personal memories associated with it, even though I do love everything about the card. And then the other thing is, if he were printed into Modern now, he would just be an enabler for 4-color nonsense, more likely than being anything that puts BGX back to tier 1. So with all of those caveats made, I'm choosing a much weaker and much stranger card for my favorite of 2012, which is Stromkirk Captain, which is just a vampire-type lord, giving everybody +1/+1 and first strike. I love, though, the art here. Absolutely love the perspective that you have, the background, the gates. It's also evocative of dark elf-style aesthetics in Warhammer Fantasy, which is another very powerful memory I have that throughout my childhood kind of runs in parallel to Magic. Maybe if I was playing one, I wasn't playing the other, and then vice versa, would go back and forth with both, but both were formative for me in terms of like aesthetics and stories that I like. And also, as far as kitchen table play goes, Stromkirk Captain, strangely enough, of all the cards, right, is one of the ones that really made me in earnest figure out how to build a 2-color deck on a limited budget, how to figure out mana bases, and all that type of stuff, and my split of colors, and in so doing, kind of set the stage for what I would later do in a much more serious way, building rock and similar decks. So yeah, Deathrite Shaman, no chance. Stromkirk Captain wins 2020. Wow, I keep saying 22. 2012, hands down. 2011 brought to the Magic world our best girl, and frankly the reason that we are all here, that you're watching this video right now, that all of our lives are the way they are in one way or another. Liliana of the Veil. I have waxed poetic about her over and over and over again. She, to me, even though I love playing pre-modern without any planeswalkers in it, and she, of course, is a planeswalker, she is also, despite that, kind of the platonic ideal to me of a well-designed Magic card. I covered this in an ancient video, I think it was called The Anatomy of a Planeswalker, comparing her to Oko, and how depletion versus resource generation is really the appropriate way to understand why, at least to some of us, certain play patterns feel so bad, and others, even though they're potentially equally powerful, feel so fine, and Liliana is representative of the latter. She's so well designed that there are times you will not activate any of her abilities and it will be the correct play. I cannot speak highly enough of her, and if you've watched this channel for a while, you've probably heard it all before. So yeah, Liliana from Innistrad, no contest. When I talked about The Last Hope, I mentioned that I owned a nice playset of Lilies of the Veil alongside that purple Last Hope. Here they are. It's the RPTQ promo, if I'm not mistaken, and these were my most prized Magic possession by a long shot. Of course, I sold all that long ago, but for a while, she was mine. '10 Inquisition of Kozilek from Rise of the Eldrazi. This is by far the best art, if you ask me, and by far one of my favorite cards from my history of playing Modern. Thoughtseize is the card that everybody knows. Thoughtseize is the card that, at the time especially, would have been more likely to be seen in people's sideboards. You know, if you combo deck like Ad Nauseam, bringing in a little discard to disrupt or whatever before you combo off. But Inquisition always felt like it truly belonged to us, the BGX players. Who else is playing Inquisition of Kozilek? Especially when Death's Shadow was still kind of in its infancy. Not too many people. So Inquisition was ours, almost ours alone, and arguably better overall than Thoughtseize. It's another card like Trophy where I have nostalgia for the discussions. Do we play 4 Inquisition and 2 Thoughtseize, or 3 and 3? These were big deals. These micro decisions in deck building really used to matter a lot, and maybe they still do, but it's just in a different way that feels much more foreign to me. And yeah, for those reasons, among many others, Inquisition has got to make my list. Here it is. There was a time, my friends, when people were asking me with increasing fervor and frequency, when will you play Jund? I was rock only on this channel, and Jund was the next natural step, and also by far the more popular archetype than rock, so I knew that sooner or later I would be compelled to play Jund. I was resistant to it, though. I didn't have any renting ability at the time, I didn't really want to buy in, and for a while I surmised, and I think correctly, that rock was actually the better deck. But then Ren and 6 came along, and also, even before that, I think the hue and cry to play Jund was becoming too strong, and I do love myself some Lightning Bolts and Kolaghan's commands. And I knew that Bloodbraid Elf, when it finally got unbanned, was a good card, but I didn't realize just how good and just how fun Bloodbraid Elf was until I started casting her for myself. Thus, she is the representative from 2009 here. You're looking at the Steve Argyle art. That is my favorite art of the four. My second favorite is on the Time Spiral Remastered, or Time Shifted, or whatever this is called, from Dominic Domingo. Most people probably would pick this card anyway, this art anyway, rather. To me, it's second place, but the gold border might put it in first. It's a real toss-up between that and the Argyle art. But yeah, Bloodbraid Elf, locking. 2009 down, no problem. 2008 belongs to a representative from one of my favorite tribes, the Elves, Heritage Druid, with some of the most just soothing and pleasing and evocative and inspiring and well-done art I've seen on a Magic card, and many other cards that fit that description are also Elves, one of the big reasons I love playing them, but the playstyle is something special as well. The art's done by Larry McDougall. I actually assumed it was a Rebecca Guay piece. I don't know much by Larry. I'll need to look into more, and assuming it was done by Rebecca Guay is a very high compliment coming from me. She's one of my favorites, if not my actual favorite Magic artist. But anyway, Heritage Druid, in addition to everything that I just said, is what represents kind of a level up moment for me, because when I was playing Abzan and taking turns and Mill and a few other things in my first year and a half or so of Modern, I was also playing Elves, and realizing how activated abilities work, especially when they're not tap abilities, and Heritage Druid being kind of a gateway to understanding the potential power of that, I feel like that was a level up moment for me and translated to just kind of understanding the game more holistically and taking it more seriously. So yeah, Heritage Druid, an awesome representative here for the year 2008. 07 belongs to a creature that will literally never be an 07. The Tarmogoyf. It might be an 01, it might be a 6-7, but it's not going to be an 07 unless you're putting a really weird aura on it. Tarmogoyf, of course, the rock upon which rock is built. This is a card that, as I've said many a time, is proactive, gets them dead, while rewarding you for interacting, while being extremely fair but extremely powerful, especially for its time. And it's something that, like many of the other favorites featured here, has kind of fallen by the wayside relative to its heyday, but it's still one of our best cards in these colors in this strategy. And it is very skill testing. Every new player has the moment where they bolt the Goyf, it's a 2-3, bing, bang, boom, got him, except wait a minute, there's no instant in the yard, and now the Goyf is just angry. And you're a card down, and now what do you do? For that reason, as well as for many other reasons, Tarmogoyf has no choice but to be on my list, whether it likes it or not. And Future Sight Goyf is my favorite one, but it's actually a very, very narrow victory over the Tarmogoyf from the Modern Master sets, whose art I actually prefer by a fair amount. It's just the Future Sight border and the iconic status of the Future Sight Goyf that does it. But Modern Masters Goyf is an absolutely stellar and spectacular card. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I don't really like the new art, so we won't even talk about that here. Goyf, you win 2007. Cold Snap came out in 2006, my friends, and that's one of my favorite sets of all time. I just love the aesthetics of it. That was a time in my life that was really fun for a whole lot of reasons, and it was a time I was also at a high ebb of playing kitchen table Magic. The two sets I've bought most packs of in my life. I haven't historically bought packs. I've been more of a, nickel box scrummager and donated card receiver and singles purchaser, but I did buy a lot of packs of Cold Snap and also a Visions. Those are two sets that spoke to me for whatever reason. Deathmark from Cold Snap is my favorite card of 2006 because, kind of like Duress, in the modern context, it reminds me of a time when you could play these really fair but efficient, even if narrow, one-for-one pieces of interaction tactically in your sideboard, and have it be, you know, kind of a fringe choice, but sometimes the perfect one. Deathmark was nice if you expected humans to be around a lot, as well as a critical mass of other creature-based decks in those colors, and when you're not playing Lightning Bolt, you do sometimes want that fifth piece of 1-mana spot removal, and Deathmark can be your guy against the right meta. At least it could back in the day. Of course, there are better choices now, but I love the flavor text as well from Cold Snap. Thangbrand Geerdsson of the Kieldoran Patrol says, I hope it's true that every snowflake is unique, because I never want to see one like that again. Now clean up that body. Great times up in Kieldor, always. 2005 is the year of the Bob. It belongs to Dark Confidant, another card about which I have waxed poetic many times on this channel. This is another example of very excellent design. Your greatness does indeed come at any cost. We've all heard that joke before, but it remains truer than ever, even if Bob has seen better days in Modern. If you think about how bad Dark Confidant fits in an old-school traditional Jund list with that high curve and the super painful lands, compared to lists that are around today, it just shows you how unique this was as an advantage engine in this color that fits into that strategy for that time. That can also turn sideways, by the way, and help end the game along with the best of them. Some of my favorite victories in Modern have been maybe discard turn 1, stick a Bob turn 2 against a big mana deck, and then continue interacting with, like, Pillages, or Ashiok, or something like that, or more discard Assassin's Trophy, whatever, and Bob has just drawn me into the gas, taken a lot of, taken his pound of flesh, but turning sideways on an empty board, doing 8 or 10 points of damage before he's finally assisted by a Tarmogoyf or something to end the game. So we love Dark Confidant, had to be on the list, and the other arts don't exist as far as I'm concerned. It's basically just Bob, but we have the amazing foil DCI, Judge Foil I think it is as well, which is the best printing of Bob by far. 2004 brought Darksteel to the fray, and the Sword cycle along with it. Sword of Fire and Ice is my favorite. It's got the most raw power. It is the most evocative to me of all the swords in that cycle, and I've always loved them. I've always said I will find a way to play Sword of Fire and Ice in Modern, one way or another. Of course, they eventually unbanned Stoneforge Mystic, and I got to do it for a pretty brief window of time. It felt decently powerful, and now, like many other things, it's not so much in the mix at the very top tables any longer. But Sword of Fire and Ice is super cool. I love the kind of thematic duality, and I like actually all of the printings of Sword of Fire and Ice, but my favorite is the original art plopped into the brown border. Can't really beat that, can ya? Alright guys, so it's 2003 now, and we're back in the good old days, and to celebrate that, I am doing 2 cards per year, but it's not because I'm fence-sitting and I can't pick a favorite in any given year. We're going to do an honorable mention, and then a favorite for each year. And the honorable mention is kind of a weird one to kick this section of the video off. It is Merchant Scroll. And this is definitely, I'm showing you the original Homelands printing. We had a different printing, I guess, in 2003, unless I got my years wrong. I hope I didn't. But this is by far the best printing you'll see. And this is actually a card I haven't cast all that much, but I just love it. I love the art and the name so much. I love the Aeron the Relentless, There is no trade without trust flavor text. And I love the kind of strange but powerful incongruity of, at sorcery speed, tutoring for a blue instant or interrupt, as the old phrasing has it. So just a card that really hits a lot of different high notes for me, even though, again, it's not like I've cast it a million times and I have all these memories about winning with it. It's just super cool. But that is honorable mention, and the winner of 2003 is Phyrexian Arena. Premodern staple, turn 1 Dark Ritual, often goes on to get you killed, still one of the best cards you can play, kind of the Bob of the format, and a card that I just meddled a little bit with in Modern. Right when I started, even then it was just not powerful enough to play, but it's almost there, right? It's almost there. But we love Gerard and Urza on the original art, and the greatness at any cost type of effect is well and truly embodied by this card, make no mistake. Alright guys, I looked it up and Merchant Scroll came out in 8th edition, which was 2003, so I didn't get my years mixed up even though I thought I did. But moving back in time to good old 2002, where the honorable mention belongs to Lava Dart, the card that made me love Red Deck Wins. When this came out and was made legal by Modern Horizons 1, it really made prowess into a deck, and to me, I had never had anything against Burn, but never really wanted to play it, but prowess, totally different animal. I was playing it a fair amount at the time. I actually had just like every time I queued it up, it was a 4-1, and the leagues were quick, and it was definitely just like really hit the spot for a little while. I even bought it in paper when I sold out of all my foil rock stuff, just to have a Modern deck on hand in case any play opportunities crossed my path, which they never really did. But the point is, Lava Dart unlocked an entire archetype for me, and it's one that I still love and respect to this day. Lava Dart also really clued me in on the beauty of the old borders. It's, for whatever reason, it's a card that made me realize how much I love old borders, mainly because I hate the look of new bordered red cards, but I love the look of old bordered red cards, right? Whereas, you know, black cards are sweet in any style, basically. So anyway, Lava Dart just very much a gateway to several different things for me, in a very interesting and unique kind of skill testing card as far as burn cards go, and but not highly rated enough to displace Cabal Therapy as the favorite for 2002. Cabal Therapy is a card that I'm really just getting to know. You can play for years and years and years and years and still not know all of the best names with Cabal Therapy in any given situation, but so far so good for me with this card in Premodern. I've just kind of been, you know, blind naming a card on turn 1 that I think is good, getting a 2-for-1. Way more than I should statistically, so maybe I'll open a practice, call myself the Cabal Therapist. I realize they already made that joke, so maybe I can't do that, but Cabal Therapy, just so cool. Really interesting deck building decisions follow this card, and as always, I love discard. It's the most pure form of interaction. It's the most well-balanced form of interaction in Cabal Therapy. Much like other forms of discard, really pumps the brakes on some of the more egregious things that would dominate any format that it's in if it didn't exist. 2001 was a great year for Dead Guys and Orzhov mages alike, because we have two gold black and white cards, both mid-range staples in any format they can exist in, Gerard's Verdict and Vindicate taking up the 2 slots. Vindicate is the honorable mention because I absolutely love the card, but it is just at the end of the day slightly more boring than Verdict. Vindicate is something that you play in order to double down on whatever you're doing, which is why it's so good because of its flexibility, but at the end of the day, it is simply 1-for-1 sorcery removal, which, by the way, is something that I love generally. But Gerard's Verdict, we've got a 2-mana, 2-for-1, most of the time anyway, with a little bit of life gain attached, and I love the art, I love the name, and the flavor text. A Heart of Light and a Soul of Darkness cannot coexist. We have synergy as well because Gerard speaks the quotation on Vindicate, thus name a better duo than these two for 2001? I bet you can. I think the turn of the millennium had us all dazed, and thus Days is a fine representative, for the honorable mention spot here in 2000. Even though it hasn't featured prominently on this list so far, and probably not for the rest of it either, I love Permission. I think Permission is healthy, I think Permission is fair, I think Permission is a big part of what makes Magic unique. I love Counterspell, I love Mana Leak, I never really tilt when those things happen to me, because it's fair, it's one for one, it's kind of like the yin and yang compared with discard. And those are the least of Magic's problems, if you ask me. Days is a little bit different, but that's kind of why I love it. I love the play patterns of Days that I've encountered thus far in Premodern. There's a very interesting psychological element if your opponent suspects you're on Daze, or if they've been dazed earlier in the match. And of course it enables all kinds of interesting shenanigans and play patterns that no other Permission really enables, without being just like an auto-include in every deck that plays the colors like the Forces are, for example. So Daze is really, really cool if you ask me, although it obviously can be a little bit tilting. And Sabo's Web wins 2000. I think this card's awesome. I can't get enough of the art. The art is very abstract and interesting, eye-catching, but also there's more than one kind of disturbing thing going on with it. It's subtle, but it's there. And I just kind of love the implications of the art combined with the name. And I think the card's really good. It's very rare in Premodern for a hate card that has such relevance to also cantrip, and to be so splashable as to only cost 2 generic mana, to the point where I'm trying to kind of brew with this card in the main deck. So yeah, Sabo's Web, definitely a sweet one, wins out at the turn of the millennium. 1999, the year of the apes. Treetop Village has got to make my list. It's here as the honorable mention. It was a serviceable, game-ending utility land for many of my modern rock victories, and it continues to be even more powerful, frankly, in Premodern. Just absolutely love it. It's just so cool. Summoning the apes never gets old. And you know what? For whatever reason, people are very prone to forgetting that this card has trample when you animate it, so people are going to throw chumps underneath it, and then you get to feel even better than you already did. So Treetop Village, absolutely OP, love to see it. And Dark Ritual, just beating it out. Of course, Dark Ritual has been printed a million times. It could have been featured. Let's put it this way. If Dark Ritual had only been printed once, whatever year it was printed in, it would be on this list. I would find a way to make it fit. As it so happened, I had my kind of pick of the litter, but I chose to put it here because this Rebecca Guay art is, I believe, the one that came out in 1999. It was either that or this Urza's Block one. Either of them are both awesome. They're both in my kind of top 4 Dark Ritual arts alongside this one from Tempest. My favorite of all time, of course, the original from Alpha by Sandra Everingham, with just the cloaked and hooded figure down in a dungeon, subterranean setting somewhere, with a book of unholy scripture and a blue flame just being conjured. Absolutely evocative, even in its simplicity. And Dark Ritual, of course, is a card that I play a lot now in Premodern, but it's a card that was never far from my side at the kitchen table. I'm talking turn 1 Dark Ritual Vampire Nighthawk, when Vampire Nighthawk was a new card. And I'm talking turn 1 Dark Ritual, play a janky 1-drop and him to Turok the opponent. You know, the list goes on and on and on. There's nothing that Dark Ritual can't do, but I don't mind broken cards as long as they're balanced, right? As long as they don't replace themselves, and as long as they can fail. And the fail rate of Dark Ritual is you don't need the mana, you draw it dead off the top, and it's definitely a little bit punishing, especially in a lot of decks that would normally like to play it. And it's restricted with triple black, just an all-around amazing card, one of the most iconic cards in the entire history of Magic, without any question. 98 brings us Mox Diamond as the honorable mention. Now, I don't have a great many associations with the original Mox cycle, but I do have more with Mox Diamond just in casual play. I think there were some proxies floating around somewhere where I used to play, and also now in premodern. And just generally, I find the design a little bit more interesting, if not quite as iconic, as the original cycle. I love how Mox Diamond is a risk to play, in that you open yourself up to, I guess, permission, or more likely artifact destruction, and kind of discard a land to do so. On the other hand, I love that discarding a land can progress your game plan if you're playing Threshold, or if you want lands in your graveyard for some other reason. I love the fact that Mox Diamond is mana fixing, the fact that this enables rainbow mana production, but again, at that great cost and great risk. It's just a lot more balanced than it probably seems. And jumping out ahead with Mox Diamond in your opener and an otherwise balanced hand that accommodates it, that is a really good feeling. But the top of the heap here, rather, is ironically the bottom. The bottomless pit. There is no bottom. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. It's been a really long video, but bottomless pit is a sweet one. I love discard. This is discard every turn in the upkeep. Get it out of your hand. And also, I think random discard is underappreciated. People think that that element of randomness has no place in modern or recent card design. I could not disagree more. Let's face it, the deck has so much randomness as it is. That doesn't mean we throw randomness into everything, but it does mean that randomness built into the mechanics of a particular card, to me, is not beyond the pale. And with discard in particular having its limitations, being such a positive influence on metagames, as I would argue, I think powering it up a little bit by introducing randomness is an acceptable way to crank up the power level of discard effects without making them too consistent and too oppressive. So that's my case for Bottomless Pit, but whether you agree with that or not, I love the card, and it's on the list. Couple of green cards coming in hot. In 1997, the honorable mention is Gaia's Blessing, partially because of the amazing art by Rebecca Guay. I've mentioned her already in this video. She's one of the best, and this is one of her best. I just love it. It's from Weatherlight, which is one of the most just kind of stirring settings. Like, you look at the Weatherlight cards and they feel so immersive and so real, and you want to learn more about the story, whereas the more recent stuff to me just does not hit those notes at all, not even close. And even the stuff that I do like some of the stuff I've mentioned here, Innistrad type stuff, I'm thinking of some of the vampires I've mentioned, those are good, but they feel almost like they're good in isolation, or they're good in a less continuous way than the immersion of something like Weatherlight is. Gaia's Blessing is also a really interestingly designed card, to the point where I think it is on the table. I think it is in the maybe board in just about any format, because it can be used proactively and replace itself. It's like an auto out to various different strategies, and it's very splashable, very castable, very reasonable all around. A nice and lovely aesthetically check on various strategies. And Kyrian Ranger, as mentioned, is another green card that tops the heap for 1997, and that is because, number one, we gotta get some more elves in here. I am probably underrating how much I have loved elves as a tribe throughout my entire Magic career, and also because this is kind of like Heritage Druid, but even a different level up from that card. Not only is this an activated ability like Heritage Druid that does not require you to tap and thus can be used while summoning sick, there are 1,000,001 different tricks that can be played. We're talking about repeatedly generating mana even when otherwise mana screwed. We're talking about being essentially a mana dork with haste, And we're talking about combat tricks, repeated ETB tricks, blowing out removal, blocking and coming back to hand, you name it. It's all there on the table with this card and with Wirewood's Symbiote out there together. But Symbiote is not as cool as Kyrian Ranger. Symbiote, spoiler, is not anywhere on this list. Kyrian Ranger is. Couple selections from Alliances for you from 1996, and these cards are so nostalgic for me, you cannot even begin to understand, but I'll try to convey it. Varchild's War Riders. I mean, what's not to like? A 3/4 for 2 is absolutely astonishing power for the cost back in the day. Like, you Zoomers don't get it. This card was insanely statted for the time. And it's got Trample. Whoa, okay. And it's got Rampage 1. Rampage is one of the most nostalgic and confusing and rarely relevant, I guess, all in all, keywords for me, but it is awesome to see it on a card on this list, with a cumulative upkeep cost, which is very serious, but cumulative upkeep in and of itself is also very interesting and very nostalgic for me, and there are ways where you can build with this cumulative upkeep cost in mind and avail yourself of the otherwise overwhelming power of Varchild's War Riders, and talk about the absolute triumvirate of amazing name, amazing art, and amazing flavor text. What tries to crush our spirit only strengthens our resolve by Lovisa Cold Eyes, Balduvian Chieftain. I love the setting of Alliances. I love this card so much. But it is beat out to the top spot of 96 by another Alliances staple, Kjeldoran Outpost, another one where the name and the art is just so immersive, and I just absolutely enjoy it. This is another card with a very high power level, but a very meaningful drawback. You're making soldiers as much as you want, one per turn at infinitum, but the ETB is very severe. And also, even though I favor the old original printing, of course, shout out to this Noah Bradley version of Kjeldoran Outpost, recently updated. It is very strong art in its own right, although very different from the original, which we have to go with. But awesome stuff from Alliances, I hope you'll agree. It is 1995 and we are in an ice age, my friends. A Darker Wastes has gotta be one of the most surprising cards on here to most of you, and even to me in a way, but I will explain. So number one, I love the name, A Darker Wastes. It's just, it just really conveys what the Ice Age set is intended to convey, and I just love Ice Age as a whole. I also really enjoy the presence of Painlands in a format. I don't remember where I heard this, but I agree with it, that the presence of Painlands is a good sign. It's kind of a tell for certain things about the format, namely that the land bases are probably not the best. And I'm not talking about like a rare exception of a deck choosing to use this when nominally better options exist for a couple of obscure reasons that make sense for that deck, but I'm talking about decks by and large relying on Painlands to splash colors if they intend to do so meaningfully. And I think that's a good thing. Same reason I like Wasteland, I like to see Painlands in a format, and I could have picked any of the Ice Age Painlands, but I love the name as mentioned and the art of A Darker Wastes. I just love it. I think it is so good. And also, Ice Age card winning out over A Darker Wastes for the top spot, once again based on that feel, that Ice Age feel, that forbidding, that sense of impending doom, the sense of just isolation and the vastness of nature and the threat of the cold and the harshness of the climate and indeed of the people. And I remember as a kid seeing this card somewhere and it just kind of setting my mind off on, well, okay, I understand what a brand is now and what does ill omen mean. I think I can infer, but like, I swear some of my vocabulary, some of my historical knowledge, it has its roots in being inspired by a Magic card and then deciding to look further into it or kind of carrying that terminology with me in my brain and then encountering it later in life. I also think cumulative upkeep is really cool. Usually it ends up being too much of a burden for the card to actually be good, but the concept is sweet. And once again, top-notch flavor text. Lavisa Cold Eyes. She's got a lot. She should have a coffee table book of quotations. Rob Alexander is the artist. So many things that I love, all in one card. It's 1994, my friends. We're almost done. Second to last year, and Order of Lightbur comes out of left field to claim the honorable mention slot. Why? Well, I don't mind protection effects, number one. I think protection effects are totally fine. Sometimes, of course, they feel bad, but generally, to me, there are much, much more egregious things than that. Because by definition, they're narrow, they're sideboard cards, they're still usually an out to them one way or another. Number two, I love mana sinks. I have a long tradition of availing myself of mana sinks in any format, because when you're interacting, you're taking the game long, you want the flexibility of deploying like an okay threat on curve, and making that okay threat into something that can snowball in the mid to late game if that is the best or only strategy available to you. I also love Order of Lightbur because I love these white clerics and the white knights and things like that. All throughout Magic, they're kind of like a reassuring thematic presence for me, and this was also at a time when the same exact card in the same exact set would often have multiple printings. So we've got the female cleric and the male cleric, and they're kind of yin and yang, they're kind of companion pieces. I can't decide which one I like better, they're both completely amazing. And also a third one, with a bunch of knights clashing, basically, for a totally different take on the Order of Lightbur, but absolutely sweet card, well worth the honorable mention if you ask me, but also was never going to get in the top spot over Hymn to Torok. I've waxed at length about discard, and I've even made the case for randomness and discard being totally fine. I wanted him in Modern Horizons too. Obviously it never happened, probably never will. Seems to be something they're going away from, but Hymn to Torok has a really good case for being my literal favorite card of all time, given how much fun I've had with it at the kitchen table, and how much discard and black cards in general have kind of informed my Magic playing career. And him, just like Order, has different arts for the same exact card in the same set. Let's go, Fallen Empire, so cool. We've got this old man in the hooded cloak, beard, that whole thing going on. It's the only one that's available online, so I'm used to seeing it. It's also fantastic. We've got this wolf one, which some people I've heard say is cheesy. Disagree. This one rocks, definitely very sweet. We've got this more ritualistic one. This is extremely cool, especially for the time. I don't think you saw quite such use of color, and this theme was not maybe as overdone as it seems to be now artistically. Definitely an awesome one. And then my favorite at the end, I can't really choose between the other three, they're all tied for second. My favorite is this one at the end by Scott Kirshner, with this kind of jester-like figure sitting at the table with a forbidding cultist of some kind, holding something I can't even tell, right? But definitely an amazing card, no matter how you look at it, no matter which one you prefer. And look at those looming shadows in the background. Wouldn't want to be there, would you? A couple of strange, off-the-beaten-path, dare I say, slightly hipstery choices, especially in the context of a black-based mid-range channel, will conclude this video. But you know, I don't have any experience of playing with the Power 9 meaningfully, and a lot of the other cards that are probably nostalgic for other people for various reasons are not quite as nostalgic for me. So for the honorable mention slot, I choose Blue Elemental Blast, and really Blue Blast and Red Blast kind of share this spot, right? One doesn't really exist without the other, but Red Blast is just not going to be, like, if I have to choose one, it's Blue Blast, because I like the art a little bit better, and either way, this is representative of my philosophy about Magic. These cards are so powerful. They are so powerful. 1 mana, instant speed, counter a spell, or destroy a permanent. Like, it's absurd, as long as it's the appropriate color, of course. But the fact that it is color restricted, and the fact that it is, at the end of the day, only a 1-for-1, despite being about as efficient of a 1-for-1 as you could ever possibly ask for, to me makes them fair. To me, makes them balanced. To me, makes them totally fine and fun to play with and against, unlike a lot of the value-generating cards that really just kind of tilted me eventually out of Modern. The Blue Blast and the Red Blast, I love them, they're so awesome. I think it's extra cool that there is a incentive to split between functionally identical, for 99% of cases anyway, Blue Blast and Hydro Blast, for example, right? That's just an extra cool layer that surrounds these cards, but I love them. In theory, those cards kind of all share this honorable mention slot, but Blue Blast is their representative. So what is my favorite card from the earliest year of Magic? It's one that I promise you will absolutely never guess, but let's not bury the lead, I'll just show you. It is Will-O-the-Wisp. It had to be a black card, first of all, that was never going to end any other way. I love it because of some of the reasons I was mentioning just a moment ago, but also throughout the entire video. The combination of the terminology used, like, in the naming conventions, which has, like, these old cards, they kind of exist in two worlds simultaneously. They refer to Magic, which even then had many of its own original ideas, right? But they also refer to things from real-life mythology or cultures. And some things, some people now would say that you shouldn't do that, or it's weird to kind of have these things bleeding over from the real world to this fictional world, and sometimes it's insensitive or whatever. I disagree. I think that it's really cool that Will-O-the-Wisp is a real thing from real myths and legends, but also is a card in Magic the Gathering. More importantly than that is the flavor text. About, and reel and rout, the death fires danced at night. The water, like a witch's oils, burnt green and blue and white. From the Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Coleridge. And again, just like the naming conventions and the references to real-world stuff, putting literal literature on flavor text to me is so cool. It is so quaint and charming, and I mean that in the best possible way. And that's a big part of what I liked about Magic back in the day, and it's probably what helped get me into actually reading some of this stuff as I got a little bit older. So Will-O-the-Wisp, let's go. Turn 1 Dark Ritual, him you, deploy Will-O-the-Wisp. You're not getting through these blocks anytime soon, because you just lost both your lightning bolts, and then I'm gonna untap and have regen up the whole rest of the game. You might as well just scoop now. Alright guys, so that was an extra long video. It's been a while since I did one of those. I've been really keeping my verboseness at a low ebb doing the 10-minute deck text, but you always knew it would go this way, didn't you, Mirabito? And hopefully it was just the right length for you. I hope you guys were letting it play while you did something else, and maybe glancing at the screen if you wanted to see a card I was talking about. But I would feel like I didn't do the video the right way if I just kind of said, these are my favorite cards, there you go. I really wanted to tell stories and to explain why. I think that's kind of the whole purpose of this, because everyone has favorites. Who really cares, right? Until you give somebody a reason to care and an explanation behind why they mean so much. So, that's what I endeavored to do here. As usual, I probably went a little bit overboard, could have tightened things up, trimmed it a little bit, but this is the content you've come to expect from me. Why change it now? Thank you once again to Steven Mirabito for his generous ongoing support and for the awesome idea. Thank you to Ryan Overturf for, I guess, originally coming up with the idea, or maybe someone else even who remains uncredited. Shout out to you. As always, I want you to let me know what you think about the video in the comments. Namely, I want you to tell me what your favorite cards are. I would love to know what they are, of course, and why. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you for more pre-modern content soon, as well as whatever game wins the poll that I put up recently between Skyrim, Witcher, and Diablo. Until then, my friends, take care, and I'll talk to you soon.